Hi, I am Miss Hoagland. I am going to be walking you through this PowerPoint today. It's just a start to some information that you'll use going forward here. So to start things off, we've come so far in educating all of our students, and it's really an exciting thing. Long ago, students were not allowed in schools. No effort was put forth to educate or see the potential that all students have, especially our students with special needs. You've probably seen lists of things that were considered as wrong a long time ago, and it was things that are normal everyday things now. But when people just didn't understand, they didn't put that effort in to understand, and they assumed something was wrong and unfixable. But we've come a long ways. In the 18th century, some residential schools and asylums were created, so these students had a place to go at least. However, there wasn't really much learning or organization going on. Then in the 20th century, some community-based programs were created. They weren't necessarily teaching students, but giving them some opportunity, even though it was just to maybe interact with other students or people in general. And they would just kind of do crafts or be in a room called a sunshine room where there were things for them to do, but not necessarily moving forward in an education. Some of these programs are still around today, and they started off as small and have really grown into something you've probably heard of: Easter Seals, the ARC, the Joseph Kennedy Jr. Foundation. We've all heard of the Kennedy Foundation, which was something that really started to shed light on students with special needs and brought some attention to it. And Autism Speaks is another one. And we all know autism is a disorder, a spectrum disorder that's growing in the number of diagnoses that we see. And this Autism Speaks organization just kind of helps to give those students a place to go, a place to be a part of the community. And that's what all of this was about, that people were realizing that all students are capable of being a part of the world and the community they live in whatever way that might best suit them. But they are a part of us. Some legislation came along as people realized the potential in all of these students. The first one was the Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This was a big step in the right direction. It was still quite vague. People didn't really know what exactly what needed to be done, but this was a big step. And it basically was just saying that there was no more discrimination, whatever that might have entailed, but there was no more of it. And then the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 defined discrimination, and it provided guidelines for public places being accessible to everybody. And a big one that affects us in the education field was that child care centers were now required to serve all children. And these accommodations could have been like a ramp for a wheelchair, or a way for somebody who is deaf to be able to hear what was going on, so maybe an interpreter. And then the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975 was when that free and appropriate public education came along. You've probably heard of FAPE. It's a free and appropriate public education. And this is when the term least restrictive environment was also introduced, and that's something you will hear a lot. The least restrictive environment is the place where your child is going to best learn. That might be the regular classroom for half of the day, and with an aide one-on-one for the other half of the day, or whatever proportions and setting works best is the least restrictive environment. That's different for everybody. And here is a big one, a big piece of legislation that you've probably heard of already: IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is when there was zero reject. So everybody everybody's going to be educated at the public level. Sensitivity to language was addressed in this piece of legislation. So when talking about children with disabilities, it became a big thing to use person-first language, and I will talk about that on just the next slide, I believe, here. An IEP was also introduced in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that is what will work best for the student. So what's that individualized education program for your student? In 2006, it was changed to Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, which is promising that things just keep on moving forward and getting better. So when we talk about the proper terminology, that's when you're going to hear the term person first. Person first means remembering that disabilities don't define our students, don't define anybody. So you may say, using some examples from this list here, the student with a developmental delay. You wouldn't say that developmentally delayed student, as that is labeling them by their disability. So you can see on this list some things that you have heard of. Maybe some of them you are a little unclear about what they may mean. Yeah, there's a whole range of them here, which is nice to know how to properly address those. So as your child's parent, what are your rights? First of all, you are required to be notified before any action is taken, and you are your child's biggest advocate. So you're the one giving consent before anything happens, whether that is being tested to go into special education, changes being made to your child's IEP, or you will also be notified and give your consent if we believe that your child's ready to be moved out of that special education setting and into the regular classroom full-time, whatever that might look like for your student. You will always be the first to know once we are thinking about making those decisions. You can review any records of your child that we have throughout this whole process, which is nice that is all there for you to look at. IDEA, that piece of legislation we were talking about just before, lays out your parent rights. So it's just nice that you can see all of your rights as a parent. You can appeal any decisions that have been made. So the most helpful way, or the most useful way that this can be used, is that if you're aware of what you see in your child and clear of any disagreements you may have, just be very vocal throughout the whole process about what you're seeing at home, what you're seeing out in the community. We get to see your child at school, but it helps if you are just very open throughout this whole time and to really use those rights, because we want to know what you're thinking and what you're feeling about your child. Your student has privacy with their records, which is nice, and it's good for you to know that as a parent that these records are private and personal. For some specific South Dakota rights and connections, because it's always nice to talk to somebody who's going through the same thing as you. This is a change for you, and we understand that. And at sdparent.org, you can connect with parents who might be going through the same thing and also just see those rights laid out specifically for South Dakota. So as I was saying before, you are a big help to us as we decide what is best for your child. Observe your child wherever you might be. If it's at home, interacting with their siblings, interacting with you, interacting with animals or things out in the community at a store. Just notice what might be going through your child's head or how they respond to different scenarios. Know your child's areas of strength and interest. So what are they good at? And what really gets them moving, gets them thinking? What are their interests? Be knowledgeable about your child's disability. So if you know as much as you possibly can about what your child is feeling or going through, it helps you to know what to look for and how you can set them up for success at home or even heading to school. And like I said before as well, connect with parents who may be experiencing the same feelings. It can be frustrating sometimes, and to just have somebody to talk to who knows those feelings of frustration or might have some advice for you is a good thing. So what is an IEP? I keep talking about an IEP. It's an individualized education program. So all students receiving special education have an IEP. A team gets together to create the best plan for your child. It lays out goals. It's flexible. It will change as we go through the school years. And it's a good way to communicate between school and home. An IEP will contain any accommodations your child will receive. An accommodation could be that tests will be read out loud to your child, or your child will leave 5 minutes early from class in order to make it to their next one. That's another one we had this year for a student who did not like the crowds of the hallway. So it could look like all kinds of things, but those will all be in the IEP. Behavioral interventions might be included. It's helpful if you are mindful of these at home as well, so you know how we are handling behaviors at school. We can just kind of keep them the same, which is a good thing. So with the process of setting up an IEP, it starts with an evaluation. This evaluation finds the student needs, strengths, and abilities, and we will evaluate your student in the most appropriate way for them. And once these needs have been decided, we'll choose the best services for your child. It could look like any of these things on this list, maybe speech or language pathology, physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, all kinds of things. Those will be in the IEP, as well as how often and in what way they will be administered. So now that you know a little bit more about setting up an IEP, what it all entails, I want you to feel free to reach out at any time with any questions you might have. I hope that this PowerPoint arose some questions for you. It's good to be thinking and always be learning more about what is out there for your child. And I want you to feel free to reach out to me in person, email, phone, whatever works best. We are a team now. We're in this together, and it's going to be a good process, a positive thing. And your child is going to come out even better from it, which will be awesome. Thank you.